This amazing story begins by showing a very large and luxurious house where a lady named Celia is trying to sleep but cannot. She stays awake all night, as if she is scared of someone. We then learn that Celia used to live with her boyfriend, Adrian. Adrian was a scientist and also a businessman who had a lot of money. This entire property also belonged to Adrian. However, Adrian treated Celia very poorly and wouldn't let her go outside. Adrian controlled everything about Celia's life, what she did, where she went, and this frustrated Celia greatly. Celia, now smart and desperate, secretly took out some pills that could knock someone out completely. She had already mixed them into Adrian's food earlier, which is why Adrian had fallen into a deep sleep. Taking advantage of this, Celia wanted to escape immediately. She packed her belongings and tried to sneak out, but Adrian's dog came, and accidentally, the car alarm went off. This scared Celia a lot, and she quickly ran outside and far away from the house. Because all the lights and alarm systems in the house turned on, Adrian woke up. However, by that time, Celia had managed to get quite far. A little later, a car arrived near Celia, with her sister inside. Celia had called her sister earlier to pick her up. Celia got into the car, but Adrian came running after them and smashed the car's window. Fortunately, Celia's sister quickly sped the car away, taking Celia far from Adrian and saving her life. When Adrian saw the pills, he realized that Celia had drugged him to knock him out. Instead of going home with her sister, Celia decided to stay with a friend named James, who was a detective. She stayed at his place for a few days because she was still too scared to go outside. Adrian had behaved terribly with her and constantly tried to control her. He even told her that he wanted to have children with her without getting married, something Celia never wanted to happen. That's why I tricked him and ran away. A few days later, Celia's sister came to visit her and told her that Adrian had committed suicide. They didn't know the reason behind it, but Celia was in shock. Adrian had everything, money, a nice place to live. He couldn't have committed suicide just because she left. Celia should have been happy, but instead, she felt a bit stressed. The next day, Celia received a letter. In it, Adrian's brother had invited her to a meeting. During the meeting, Adrian's brother told Celia that before Adrian died, he transferred all his old properties to her name and left her $5 million. Adrian's brother, who was a lawyer, also took Celia's signature and legally transferred the property to her name. Celia was very happy about this and went home to share the news with James. We are then shown James' daughter, Sydney, who was planning to go abroad for her studies but didn't have enough money. So, Celia decided to transfer $100 into Sydney's account every month to help her comfortably continue her studies. Both James and Sydney were overjoyed by this gesture, and they hugged Celia. Celia, too, felt good about using the money for a worthy cause. One day, while Celia was cooking in the kitchen, she suddenly felt as though someone was watching her from behind. When she turned to check, someone had increased the flames, burning all her food. Luckily, Sydney arrived in time and used a fire extinguisher to put out the fire, preventing a big disaster. Celia hadn't paid much attention to these incidents, but deep down, she felt like someone was watching her constantly. Later that night, as Celia was sleeping next to Sydney, she felt someone pulling her blanket down. Afterward, there was the sound of a camera flash. Celia immediately woke up and noticed her blanket had fallen on the floor. Suddenly, she heard noises from behind again, and when she turned around, it seemed as if someone was sitting on the chair. Celia, trying to calm herself, placed the blanket over the chair, but no one was there. After clearing her mind, she picked up the blanket and walked back towards the bed. However, someone suddenly stepped on the blanket. Although no one was visible, there were clear footprints on the blanket, and they were slowly approaching her. This made Celia scream loudly in fear. Sydney and her father, James, rushed to her side and tried to calm her down. Celia started explaining to them that she had seen someone who was trying to come towards her. James comforted her, saying that she needed to forget about her past experiences, attributing this to stress, and suggesting that medication would help her recover. Celia, too, tried to dismiss it as a coincidence and decided to stop paying attention to such things. The next day, Celia went for a job interview, as she didn't like sitting idle. However, she suddenly felt weak and collapsed, losing consciousness. James quickly took her to the hospital, where her blood tests were conducted. A few hours later, Celia received her reports, and the doctors informed her that she had strange drugs in her system, which had caused her to pass out. Shockingly, these were the same drugs that Celia had once given to Adrian to make him unconscious. What was even more surprising was that she found the same bottle of pills at her house, something she had left behind at Adrian's house. How did the bottle end up in her home? She couldn't understand. This made Celia suspicious of Adrian, so she took James and went straight to Adrian's brother, who was also a lawyer. Celia confronted Adrian's brother, saying, "I know Adrian is not dead. He was a scientist, and he must have figured out a way to become invisible. Now, as an invisible person, he's tormenting me." But Adrian's brother and James didn't believe her at all. They thought that Celia's mind was troubled and that she was behaving irrationally. Frustrated, Celia left and went to her sister's house. However, her sister coldly told her, "Don't talk to me ever again." Celia was shocked when her sister refused to meet her, mentioning the offensive email Celia had supposedly sent. Confused, Celia rushed home to check her emails and found that someone had sent several inappropriate messages to her sister from her account. She hadn't written any of them. Later, while she was sitting with Sydney, who was thanking her for paying her college fees, something shocking happened. Someone suddenly slapped Sydney. She screamed for her father, James, who quickly arrived and, assuming Celia had hit Sydney, scolded her harshly. He told Celia to leave immediately, as he believed she had been acting strangely. However, Celia knew she wasn't responsible for this incident, and she suspected Adrian might have something to do with it, even though she wasn't completely sure yet. Determined to gather evidence, Celia tried various tricks to catch Adrian. She spilled coffee all over the floor, hoping to see invisible footprints, but nothing appeared. She also attempted to communicate with Adrian, but there was no response. Then, when she called Adrian's number, she was startled to hear the ringing sound coming from upstairs. Climbing up with the help of a ladder, she found Adrian's phone. Upon checking it, she discovered photos of herself that Adrian had secretly taken. Just then, a message appeared on the phone, "Surprise." This confirmed Celia's suspicions. Adrian was indeed still around, invisible and tormenting her. Looking down, she could sense someone was there. In a desperate move, she grabbed a nearby can of paint and threw it in the direction she sensed someone. The paint revealed the outline of Adrian's body, confirming he was using invisibility technology. Adrian quickly fled, trying to wipe off the paint and disappear again. Celia followed the paint-covered footprints, but Adrian washed the paint off his face, becoming invisible once more. He approached Celia, grabbed her, and attempted to overpower her. However, Celia managed to escape by outwitting him. She then went straight to Adrian's high-tech lab, the place where he used to conduct his experiments. To her surprise, the lab doors opened easily using her fingerprints, allowing her entry. Celia had now stepped into the very laboratory where Adrian had perfected his invisibility experiments. As Celia was exploring the entire place, she discovered a suit that, when worn, could make someone invisible. This was the same technology Adrian had been using to become invisible. Suddenly, Adrian's dog started barking loudly, signaling that Adrian was nearby. Celia quickly tried to hide the suit, but unfortunately, Adrian had already arrived and began attacking her, causing her harm. However, for some unknown reason, Adrian let Celia go for the time being. Celia immediately called her sister for a meeting and explained everything, telling her that she had not sent those emails. Adrian had done it. He was still alive and had become invisible. But suddenly, Adrian appeared and slit her sister's throat with a knife, then placed the knife in Celia's hand, making it look like she had murdered her own sister. Everyone began to believe that Celia was the one who killed her sister, and they also started thinking she was mentally unstable. As a result, she was taken to a hospital, where they gave her sedatives to put her to sleep. Celia spent most of her time in unconsciousness, but at one point, Adrian whispered, "Surprise," in her ear. Celia kept shouting that Adrian was alive, but no one believed her, and they all thought she had completely lost her mind. After a medical report, it was revealed that Celia was pregnant. However, Celia couldn't believe it because she had been taking birth control pills and knew she shouldn't be pregnant. Later, we see Celia talking to James, explaining everything to him, including how Adrian was behind all the incidents, and she wasn't at fault. She told him that Adrian had slapped his daughter and framed her. James started to understand Celia's situation and regretted leaving her alone, promising to keep an eye on everything and help her from now on. Celia then said that she could prove Adrian was still alive and behind all the strange events. A little later, Adrian's brother, Tom, approached Celia. Tom told her that since she was now considered a murderer, he couldn't give her any of Adrian's properties or money. However, he offered her a deal. If she agreed to become the mother of Adrian's child and fully accept the child as her own, all the properties would be transferred to her name, and the murder charge would be dropped. Upon arriving there, Celia realized that Adrian's brother, Tom, was also involved in all of this. Tom revealed that Adrian had known from the beginning that Celia was taking pills to avoid pregnancy, so he had secretly replaced her pills. Celia, now confused, was told she would soon become the mother of Adrian's child. When Tom got distracted, Celia secretly stole a fountain pen. After being taken into the cell, she used that same fountain pen to cut her wrist. Celia then said, "If I'm not alive, you won't be able to have your child," implying she was attempting suicide. However, at that moment, Adrian, who was invisible, grabbed her hand. Celia had anticipated this and planned for it. Seizing the opportunity, she took the fountain pen and began stabbing Adrian repeatedly. She stabbed him so many times that the suit Adrian was wearing became damaged, making him partially visible. Despite the suit's damage, Adrian started attacking all the officers in sight since they could now see him. Wearing the suit, Adrian killed several police officers. Celia picked up one of the officers' guns and went after Adrian. It was raining heavily outside, and in the rain, Adrian's form became visible. He caught Celia and threatened her, saying, "If you don't listen to me, I will kill everyone you care about." Next up is Sydney, referring to James's daughter. Celia begged Adrian not to harm Sydney, but Adrian didn't listen and went straight to James's house, where Sydney was. He attempted to attack her, but James, determined to protect his daughter, started firing at Adrian. Since Adrian was invisible, James couldn't see him and missed. Adrian then severely injured James and was about to kill him when Celia arrived just in time. She sprayed a fire extinguisher at the invisible Adrian, making him visible. Taking advantage of this moment, Celia fired multiple shots at Adrian, severely wounding him until he collapsed and died. However, when Celia removed his mask, she was shocked to find that it wasn't Adrian, it was his brother, Tom. This meant that Adrian was still alive. When Celia presented all these facts with proof to the police officers, a team was sent directly to Adrian's house. After thoroughly investigating, they found Adrian tied up in a storeroom, which meant that Adrian had never committed any of the crimes. It had been his brother Tom all along, who had stolen Adrian's suit to become invisible. Once all the evidence came to light, everyone realized that Celia was telling the truth, and she was released. Later, Celia, James, and Sydney sat together, discussing everything that had happened. Although everything seemed normal now, Celia still didn't feel at ease. She was convinced that Adrian, not Tom, had been behind it all. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to go to Adrian's house. She had already planned everything with James, intending to prove that Adrian was responsible for everything. Celia had given James access to the CCTV cameras, and he had a microphone to listen in on their conversation. At Adrian's house, Celia sat down with him for dinner and confronted him again, asking him to admit that he was behind all of it. But Adrian kept denying it, insisting that it had been his brother Tom and that he had changed. He promised he would never harm her again and would be a good husband. Adrian even pleaded with Celia to have his child and live with him. However, Celia told him that she could only continue their relationship if he accepted the truth. She couldn't build a relationship on lies. She asked again for him to confess that he was responsible for everything. Adrian, still refusing to admit it, suddenly leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Surprise," in the same way he had done when he was invisible. At that moment, Celia knew for certain that Adrian had been the one behind all the events. And it was Adrian who had taken his sister's life as well. Celia told Adrian she was going to the washroom. While Adrian was calmly eating dinner, he suddenly picked up a knife and slashed his own throat, dying on the spot. When Celia returned from the washroom, she saw Adrian's lifeless body. She managed to escape, avoiding the camera footage, but after such a huge incident, there was no trace of fear on her face. She remained completely calm, wearing a strange expression as she stepped outside, where James was waiting for her. Celia informed James that all the evidence he needed would be in the video footage, clearly showing that Adrian had taken his own life, which would suffice as proof of suicide in court. Just then, James noticed the invisible suit in Celia's bag, the very suit that allowed anyone to become invisible. This meant that Celia had killed Adrian while invisible to take her revenge. In fact, she had taken that suit from her laboratory earlier and hidden it away. While talking to Adrian, she had gone to the washroom, put on the invisible suit, and returned to kill him. James was aware of this, and although he could have exposed Celia for murdering Adrian, he chose not to say anything. It was her life, and how she took her revenge was her decision. Celia quickly left the scene, a look of relaxation in her eyes, having avenged her deceased sister. Now, a long life awaited her, along with Adrian's vast fortune. Our story concludes here with this happy ending.